I felt like in one sense we got two caricatures, or they exist in Christendom. Both of
Yeah.
them exist. But a real man of God exists in between.
The lesson of this movie is that people need a Damascus moment in order to have grace for their enemies so that people can be healed. That's pretty cool.
In a world where entertainment is viewed as mindless diversion, only good for momentary distraction, you are about to enter a new world, and you will never view entertainment in the same way again. This is Popcorn Theology.
Welcome, movie lovers and theology nerds, to Popcorn Theology, where we examine films for where they align with our greatest story and greatest storyteller of all, discussing what to receive, reject, and redeem for common ground, fruitful conversation, and mindful movie consumption. I am Monsignor Miles.
And I'm Father James.
Yeah.
That feels
Yeah.
uncomfortable. I don't know.
I was thinking on the drive over to record, I was like, I remember that Bible verse about don't call anybody father. I
That's
wonder
right.
how they get around with that. Sorry for an early jab at Catholics. We're proudly Protestants, but we love you Catholics if you're listening here. And what movie
right.
are we looking at, James?
We are looking at, surprise, surprise, Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery, written and directed by Rian Johnson and starring Josh O'Connor and Glenn Close. Wait, there's a lot more in there.
Yeah,
We know. We got him. Daniel Craig and Mila Kunis. Look it up on IMDb if you want more. I think that's
yeah.
good enough. What's the plot summary for us?
Well, the plot is crazy, but as simply as it can be put, is the third in the Knives Out series. You have Detective Benoit Blanc, who teams up with an earnest young priest to investigate a perfectly impossible crime that takes place in a small-town church with a dark history.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And it's a quality Knives Out murder mystery. And as you know, Popcorn Theology, we assess our movie for their popcorn content and their theology content. So, James, if this is, as a movie, if this is a bucket of popcorn, is it stale, is it fresh, or deliciously buttered and salted?
Well, I've been a fan of the series so far. I'd say the first movie, Knives Out, was buttered and salted. And the second one, I enjoyed it. It didn't stay with me, so it was just a little more fresh. Fresh in the moment. I'd have to watch it again to see how it held up. But the third one, I feel like it's in between. I think it's edged up there toward buttered and salted. I was sort of back to form, I felt. And, of course, it had some setting that, of course, sort of hit a little near and dear to home. So I think that may have bumped it up. Great cast, as always. Benoit Blanc. I think that character is being formed into just a great franchise character. Like in the spirit of Miss Marple, Hercule Poirot, Sherlock Holmes, like the classic characters of mystery that we've had in the past, I feel like Rian Johnson's really cementing Benoit Blanc as a new modern addition to that ensemble. We don't have a lot of murder mystery movies like this. There are a few series out there now that have kind of been playing with those forms, but so I'm glad it exists. I would love to see that. I would love to see, as long as Daniel Craig wants to play this character, I'd see as many more as they want to throw at us.
Yeah. I'd say it's fresh. Pretty solid movie. It's entertaining, and like the first Knives Out, has a really likable lead that you just are rooting for throughout the movie. You know, he's interesting, and I'd say kind of three-dimensional in his personality, while he's surrounded by more two-dimensional characters.
Yeah.
But I think a good way to put it is that many of the things that worked about the first movie are carried over into this third one. And the only reason it's really not buttered and salted for me is when I went to rewatch it for this podcast, I was just a little bit reluctant because the movie is really pretty long. Also, the mystery, when it's unraveled, is a rat's nest. Like it's very complicated. Interesting, but very complicated, almost too complicated. But even sitting in the audience chair, I'm really impressed that somebody could write a story like this, even over the course of like a year.
Yeah.
The way all the ins and outs. I don't even know where you begin trying to create a plot like this and then work the way backward to the script.
Yeah, reverse engineer, maybe. Yeah, kind of from. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe you read a bunch of mystery novels and then compile a plot.
Join a book
Perhaps.
club and read a lot of the mystery novels.
Yeah,
So,
Oprah.
yeah.
Oprah can lead you down that.
That's
down
right.
that way. But yeah, as a popcorn movie, so buttered and salted, fresh between us. But as a theological movie, the setting alone is tantalizing. So if this is a theological soda, is it diluted, carbonated, or just my cup runneth over? What do you think, James?
Well, I think this would be running over. I think that we'd have a cup runneth over scenario here. And I say that because we have such a big cast of characters. I think about little things, even about the one character who builds a literal moat around his house.
Yeah.
That's not too much of a spoiler, although it's more symbolic. But
Yes.
like you could take each of those characters and probably we could spend 5 or 10 minutes on each member of the cast, which we won't do in this episode. I think we could have our listeners provide some of that in comments and discussion afterwards. But like each one of them is kind of their own interesting character study of somebody involved with the church. So I think I think it runs over as far as you could talk about that, even though I agree they're a little two-dimensional. So it's almost like looking at these different Christian or church adjacent caricatures and then talking about the realities of them. I think that alone could lead to the runneth over, even before you get to some of the major interactions of the plot points. So I think so.
That's pretty persuasive. I put carbonated here, but I think you might have me a cup runneth over there. Because just imagining, we could slice this into several podcasts just doing that, and it would be fruitful. It'd be fruitful conversation. But for me, I'd put carbonated. I mean, solidly carbonated. Just the religious imagery throughout the movie and references are pretty thick, and there's a lot of perspectives represented, even though kind of two-dimensional. Sometimes quite fair, and sometimes their lines, their points of view are what you might actually find in people, even if it's like cranked up a little bit to 11 in their personality.
Stereotypes are true for a reason.
Stereotypes, yeah, they exist because they exist.
There is nothing in any of these characters in this movie that I haven't seen on social media. So
yeah, or in my church in some places. And I like that this movie celebrates sincerity of faith at the very least. Maybe not the truth of faith, but sincerity, and explicitly celebrates the example of Jesus. Maybe not all of Jesus, but praise God, it tells a story in which somebody believes that following Jesus is what the world needs. I'll take it.
Yeah.
That's very refreshing to see a Christian hero who's actually celebrated for his faith in practice, and the faith isn't a total just warping of what actual Christian faith is.
Well, yeah, even if the movie doesn't get Christianity 100% right, they at least didn't have... They didn't just have the only character that stood in the gap and stood for what was right be the non-Christian character or the atheist or the agnostic. Like, yeah, you actually had a functional Christian who was not maligned. Certain types were, and then certain types weren't, and then some were redeemed.
Yeah, so I think, like as you were saying, it steps up to the line of ideology or preaching, but it's just not exactly thumping you with anything, or just even to give a bit of a preview. Major themes that we could have spent like large segments on is like number 1, what should the church do in relationship to the world? Big question in this movie. Number 2, religion as a lie or helpful, or is it just a helpful story that reveals something true inside our hearts, or maybe something else? Number 3, the Damascus moments, realizing what is truly important in the world. They'll have specifics about that. Or just the harm of lies and deception, even with good motives, is all throughout this movie. And then good old-fashioned, like Knives Out across all of their movies, is just the evil temptation of greed. And it's just a great kind of storytelling that I'd say this movie does not feed your flesh, but actually tries to challenge your spirit. And so that's pretty refreshing, even if I probably don't agree with Ryan Johnson's assessment of of faith in general.
Yeah, well, I'd even throw in, you could have a whole arc on what we expect participating with and from the church, because there's characters that expect healing or expect that their contributions are guaranteeing them something, and that either from bad theology or just bad expectations. So yeah, there's so many places we could go, but we'll have to narrow it down when we come back.
Yeah, we'll narrow it down. But before we get into our spoiler section, if you want to support the podcast, like, share, subscribe, engage with us, bump us up in those algorithms. As always, a review can really help us. And if you really want to help out with just a few dollars a month, you can become one of our patron saints and steer this podcast. I promise you we won't drain you of your life savings and give you empty promises of miraculous healings. But you just get to be a part of this awesome ministry that we love. And also, you could take a look at our Popcorn Theology merch store. We could be like in Spaceballs. Spaceballs, we have Popcorn Theology, the Flamethrower, Popcorn Theology, the Breakfast Cereal. No, not quite. Nice. But we got towels and shirts. And you can remind people that you are not a mindless consumer. So let's drop our ads, and we'll get back to Wake Up Dead Man.
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird!
It's a plane!
Cinemagog, The Marvelous Era. James Harleman here, the cinema guy, announcing the sequel to my first book on film and faith. Let's face it, entertainment has changed dramatically since the first book published in 2012, and comic book characters and franchises are everywhere. So I decided to set my sights on superheroes and examine the evolution of Hollywood in this follow-up to the first Cinemagog book. For example, what does Loki tell us about culture's view of God? Why does the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Infinity Saga continually align with biblical themes? In the Marvelous Era, I review each film and show not only how the individual movies express gospel parallels, but each phase essentially reveals a multi-point sermon. I also explore DC, Star Wars, the Monsterverse, and more. Without compromising scriptural truth, we can sift these stories and discover how we might reject, receive, and redeem ideas for personal reflection and Christian conversation. Also, has Hollywood's messaging gotten worse? The book explores ways these marvelous mythologies correspond with conversion, Christian living, church history, and Reformation, but I do also highlight what has been the entertainment industry's darker, indoctrinating decade, as well as toxic fandom and the dangers of immersion in pop culture that just might drown us spiritually if we're not careful. So suit up, assemble, and join me on a journey to the Infinity Saga and beyond. Cinemagog, The Marvel Us Era. Now available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle editions.
And we're back, dropping the spoiler warning, and we are about to dip into some popcorn. Yeah. I think you actually have popcorn this time, right?
That's right.
Okay, so James, you thought this was buttered and salted. Why was that? Tell us a little more about your popcorn assessment of this meal.
Okay, first of all, I want that pulpit.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, come on. That was so amazing. And I believe stolen straight out of Moby Dick. If you read the beginning of Moby Dick before the ship sets sail,
yeah,
a bunch of the guys go to church. I think they even had it represented in the old version and some new versions. But it describes in the book that it looks like the front of a ship is where where the preacher for all the departing sailors kind of comes out and gives them this hearty sermon.
Looks like a pulpit of perpetual fortitude.
That's right. But that was so. I mean, the design in this is pretty amazing. Even the lighting effects that are used for certain moments, even like the colors as certain characters are expressing themselves. And I think there's even subtle things that I didn't notice at the outset that kind of rewatching it again, it's like, oh wow, yeah, he's playing with the color palette to sort of affect the mood depending on the piece. So just. Rian Johnson knows his craft, even if he makes controversial choices with things like Star Wars. And he does often in Star Wars, and I think thought more in the second Knives Out movie. It's just there are agendas pushed, but
yeah,
it's like he kind of, especially here, he goes right up to the line. He made no. I've seen interviews on the side. He talks about he wanted to say some things about Christianity, but okay, fine. I felt like he did. It's good conversation, but. You mentioned how convoluted the plot was. So yeah, this was like an Agatha Christie novel. The two wolf heads. I didn't catch that. I don't know if you did. Right? The way that he would use misdirection. The second time I watched it, it's like, oh yeah, no, I can see that there's two wolf heads in that picture. Yeah. The way it was sewn to the jacket, just the convoluted death plot, which populates a lot of fun mystery stories. I thought was just great. And then the scene with the acid bath. That was almost some like old school horror movie kind of stuff. Just kind of creepy and
It was like a little
cool.
bit jump the shark in the plot, but still kind of fit by that time.
Yeah, and then honestly, probably a standout moment was Blanc's entry into the church. The way he shows up, and of course the conversation that ensues, but even just the awkward way he will comport himself or play off. Do you want me to go? Or I just he doesn't even identify himself at first. And
or the way he keeps Judd hanging. I showed you the picture, right? He doesn't explain himself as he's going, which works for the audience, so then there's a bigger reveal at the end. But he's an interesting character that way.
Well, and waiting 45 minutes before you really introduced him made it really powerful when he showed up.
Yeah.
And some people have complained that he's not there for the first 45. I do admit that, like you were saying, it's a little long. They could have trimmed it. Maybe a half hour he could have showed up. They could have pared this film down. But honestly, obviously, we're going to talk about the conversations. That was what I liked the most.
Oh, it's
but that,
great.
of course, moves us into the theology side. So I'll wait to talk about that. Some people, though, I saw them complaining about, they said most people were good. Mila Kunis wasn't good. Kind of poorly cast or didn't fit the role. I kind of felt like that was her character. They kind of said that at the beginning, like she's way in over her depth. Like she's almost this token sheriff in this town that never has any trouble, and now they have some trouble, and she's So I felt like I didn't feel like she was acting out of her depth. I felt like her character was supposed to be that
and at
way.
least she has the wisdom to call for help.
Yeah. But this movie, I think, ultimately was anchored by the two Joshes.
Yeah.
I mean, if Josh O'Connor, who I don't really know from anything else, and Josh Brolin, who, of course, is awesome in just about everything he does, Thanos or not, if they hadn't been strong, I think the movie would have been weak. If their scenes and their interactions, if Monsignor Wicks as basically the villain of the piece had not been a strong performance, and if Josh O'Connor had been a new guy and hadn't carried it well, the movie wouldn't have worked. So I think a lot sits on their shoulders. Daniel Craig comes in the middle, but yeah, their scenes together are great, and we'll talk about those in a little bit.
Yeah.
What about you, man?
For me, it's good. Like bridging off from your conversation to Josh, he carried the movie. You know, if Benoit Blanc hadn't been in the movie, I kind of wouldn't have even mattered as much to me because I really felt for this guy. Genuine motives. He was an innocent, likable protagonist, which is why I think the first Knives Out and this one have so much in common, is that Marta in the first one is so likable. Ana de Armas looks innocent, and she had that feature where if she can't lie, she'll puke, I think it is, which means she's, to her core, a good person in that movie. Similarly, you're in this third movie, you're following somebody like that, and Benoit Blanc is saving a person through justice in both of those movies. And so it makes me a little more emotionally invested in the story. Like for me, I can't even remember really what happened in Glass Onion. I can remember scenes, but I can't remember that. But I think it's because of the likable protagonist and the tension that you feel along with them. That's, at least for me, that's what sells it for me. And then just the colorful cast, all of them have a good colorful cast. But the first Knives Out and the third really have a similar type of greed and incentives that run through each of the characters, which I think also works really well. And then in both those two, the political message was a little clearer to me. I mean, he's not totally preaching, but like the first Knives Out movie, the more I think about it in the years since, it's just clear to me it's a parable about the way that different groups in America view their inheritance with our great wealth being born in this country and our interaction with immigrants who also might deserve to be a part of that kind of dream. And so I think that's actually kind of relevant to some of the discussions we are having today politically, even more maybe than Wake Up Dead Man. But whereas the first Knives Out was a discussion, I think, of immigration and inheritance, who gets to have the riches of America, I think Wake Up Dead Man is largely about conservative churchgoers. I mean, like Father Wicks very much looks like Trump and very much looks like the view of people who don't like Trump, what they think he is at his core. And that was, I just couldn't help but see that in this. And then the people who surround him, he either represents Trump or any pastor that supports Trump in the minds of Hollywood, I think. And then all the people that surround him are emotionally stunted, fearful people who have been tricked based on what they hate or what they hope for, and they aren't emotionally mature, and they need help. Is kind of kind of the message I got from it. It's still okay because it just wasn't beating you over the head so much. And then, meanwhile, while they're being caricatured, Father Judd appears to be kind of in some ways, a caricature of what, well, in this case, it's Ryan Johnson is an ex-Christian, what he thinks a pastor should be. Kind of, It's a charitable interpretation, but you get the sense of, like, as a pastor, I get a sense, often online in interactions with people, of what they think a pastor ought to be. Yeah. Ought to do more or less of. And Ryan Johnson, he even said explicitly in interviews that, okay, I was a Christian up through my 20s, and Father Judd represents a lot of what I really appreciate about Christianity. And you could see it. He made a hero out of somebody who believes something that he no longer does. And I thought that's kind of neat. Yeah. Now that's we're getting into theology, but that's and then so like Blanc and Judd appear to be kind of two sides of Ryan's faith journey, which we'll get into in just a little bit. As a quibble about this movie, though, is it seems like a competent coroner, either back in the 70s when Prentice died, or in the present when Wicks died, could have dealt a major blow to either of these plots.
Either found the jewel.
Yeah, found the jewel. Asked why did he die, right? Or in Wicks's case, why is there fake blood on him? And probably could have figured out when he was stabbed and how. So, like, let's just say it's a small town. They're terrible at their jobs. Yeah. But they went to the coroner's office and made it an issue for me. And so, but the movie is so entertaining and fun that I just kind of forgive the plot hole, because if you accept that, it's interesting and fun, a fun journey. And as our podcast loves, the reason why we're covering it, theological jumping points everywhere and something to wrestle with. And so we'll get into our theological segment, taking a drink theological soda. Okay, so we're not going to talk about every single character, though we could. But you mentioned that introduction between Judd and Benoit Blanc is great. And so one thing I like about this movie is, you remember what was Judd doing when Blanc showed up? Do you remember?
He's kneeling. He's
kneeling. He's desperately praying, and he's saying, like, Jesus, like, show me a way out of here. And Blanc shows up, hello. And so, again, this movie portrays... You ask yourself, how does it portray God as a character? And it's a funny thing, because God is provident. He's providing for Judd all throughout this movie, even as people are debating whether he's actually there. He's praying to Jesus, not Christ. He says Christ a lot throughout the movie, but this desperate praying to Jesus after a night in prayer, and Blanc shows up. And then
which is a great biblical talking point we won't get too deep in, but right, I mean, I've just been preaching through the book of Daniel, and you see how God uses Nebuchadnezzar. God uses people who don't believe in him to achieve his providential will all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
That's right.
And so he's praying, Blanc shows up, and then they have this conversation, and Judd is actually kind of caring for Blanc's soul a little bit. How does this all make you feel? Blanc says, how does it make me feel? Truthfully? Yeah. Judd says, sure. And he mentions the architecture, but when he's talking about really faith, it's like someone has shown a story to me I do not believe. It's built upon empty promise of a child's fairy tale filled with the malevolence and misogyny and homophobia, and it's justified untold acts of violence and cruelty all the while, and still hiding its own shameful acts. It's like an ornery mule kicking back. I want to pick it apart and pop its perfidious bubble of belief and get to the truth I can swallow without choking. It's like,
well, and then he's like, the rafter details are fine though.
Yeah.
And I love his genuineness though, because he's like, listen, you want to kick me out? You go right ahead. He's like,
and then Judd just goes, no, I appreciate you being honest. But I think that there's plenty of people who watch this movie, hear that from Blanc, and go, yes, I identify with that guy.
Yeah. And it's filled with all sorts of problems, right? Like,
yeah.
Now we have to have a conversation about what you think misogyny is and what homophobia is, if you can be non-phobic about something versus maybe having an opinion about it. Where can I disagree without being phobic? Can I disagree on lifestyles without being a horrible person? And, acts of violence, undoubtedly. There's a lot of interesting stuff in the Bible to talk about. But I would hope an investigator like him might have been able to parse out some of those things a bit, which actually theologically there are answers for a lot of those things. It's funny though, because I've noticed even some of the sharpest minds, a guy like I'm just going to say it, a very sharp mind, or it has been. He blunts it with marijuana, but Bill Maher, right? He can be insightful and incisive and deliberate and very thought-provoking and very, very meticulous and methodical in the way he thinks. But then when you say Christianity, you just see this veil come down.
Yeah.
So it's very believable to me that you'd see somebody like Benoit Blanc, like he can solve the impossible crime, but the multifaceted paradoxes, not contradictions, within Christianity. It's like he looks at that and suddenly it's like, oh, that's this horrible thing. Like,
yeah. And it's like you absorb exactly the values of your modern culture, Benoit Blanc, and you don't see through any of them.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask every character in this movie, it's like, what do you think God wants in terms of morality? What is your vision? Because there's a lot of assumptions there, but it's still fine. But watching Benoit Blanc in that scene, it made me think of J. Warner Wallace, who his ministry is Cold Case Christianity. He was a detective that investigated the claims of Christ and came to faith. And so it's like, this isn't just for the unthinking, but it's a fun conversation, because I think that represents Rian Johnson's skepticism. But on the other hand, Judd's response is, after a bit of an exchange, he says, yeah, all the rites, the rituals, the costumes, all of it, storytelling. You're right. I guess the question is, do these stories convince us of a lie, or do they resonate with something inside us, something profoundly true that we can't express any other way except storytelling? And I think that's him just kind of tipping his hat.
Yeah, that's where the movie had me. It's like, wait, this is Popcorn Theology.
That's exactly Popcorn Theology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, guys like Rian Johnson, or whether they're telling a Star Wars story or whether they're telling something like this directly addressing Christianity, like, why are we telling these stories? Because maybe there's something profoundly true in there that we can't express in any other way. And so even if we don't know Jesus, the narrative keeps circling that type of narrative.
And the stories that you love, even if you hate the church and what the church has done or been abused in the church, the stories you gravitate to have heroes that are shaped like Jesus all the time. And it sounds very much like somebody was listening to Jordan Peterson, who talks about like how all of these stories have the meta-narrative and the archetypes deeply are embedded within the way you see the world is Christian. It's the framework, it's the lens, it's the eye through which you see, not the object that you're looking at, those kind of things. And so it felt very fair and felt like Rian Johnson was actually having a conversation with himself, with his own struggles with faith. And I was just like, it's cool. Both of your heroes, you have an atheist and a Christian fighting side by side for justice against lies and greed and like political ickiness. And so that interaction, Popcorn Theology through and through, which is why it was like, I watched this movie just for fun with my wife. I was like, how about I take off my Popcorn Theology brain for a little while? And it drew me back in.
The movie's like, no, you will not. Well, and I think where Benoit Blanc tips his hand, which I think a lot of people do, and I just throw that out there for people to think about, is he says he wants to pick it apart and get to a truth I can swallow without choking. Now, I think, like, break that down for a second. I want to pick apart this thing, whatever it is, in this case, the story of Jesus, like the Bible. I want to get to a truth. Notice he doesn't say the truth.
Yeah.
A truth. So that sort of like, wait, so subjective? And then he says, one I can swallow without choking. And here's where I challenge anybody. Because I don't know about you, And I say this in sermons. I think sometimes maybe I trip out some of my Christian friends. Like, there's a part of me that doesn't like some things about the story of God. It's now I have some duality there. It's like, well, no, if I've come to a mature place in Christ where, all right, I may not understand that. I and my flesh might not like it. I got to assume that's a part of me that doesn't understand you or doesn't understand. Like, if somehow my religion matched up perfectly so that there was nothing I tripped over or choked on,
Yep.
like, that makes me doubt it's real. That makes me think that I've just made up something for me.
Yeah, you are God in that case. I mean, honestly,
right.
If God has never disagreed with you once, that's like one test I often talk about with people is, okay, do you want to figure out whether you're actually Jesus is your Lord in any meaningful sense? Can you tell me one time in your life where you wanted to go right, he said left, and you went his direction and not yours? Because there's plenty when you're genuinely following him. It's actually a lot of what Judd goes on in this movie is one reason why I love the character is he's continually struggling with how he wants to react versus how Jesus is leading to him to react. And that was very relatable and a really good story to tell. That's why I say he's three-dimensional and other people are two-dimensional. Because, she says, you're a false priest. And he slaps her hand away immediately. Yes, I feel that. And then he's going, sorry. It's great.
Well, that's interesting because you mentioned that earlier, and part of me came away from watching it the first time thinking of him as two-dimensional, which was kind of the main thing that was rattling through my brain as I thought about what to talk about. And yet I see what you're saying enough to be like, no, I think you're right. I think that ultimately he is a three-dimensional character because I know people like this in real life. So I can't say he is two-dimensional or one-dimensional. Or maybe that's just it. I think some of the characters were one-dimensional. There's a couple of guys.
I'm okay with that kind of breakdown. Like, I have issues with some of his worldview. I don't think he's been reading all of his Bible.
Right.
But he felt like a real person. Almost everybody else felt somewhat fake and truncated.
No.
To me, that's kind of what I mean by him being a fully fledged person with struggles that he was actually submitting part of his body, part of his life, to his worldview, whereas other people just seem to be more id than.
Yeah. Well, what I saw was the clash, obviously, between Wicks and Judd, and what I wrote down first was I had written down what I saw there was two-dimensional priests highlighting the need for a three-dimensional God, and that because here's why I would break it down. The end of Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know if everybody's seen that listening to this, but end of Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill asks the team, he's kind of like, well, what do you want to do? Something good, something bad, bit of both, and he concludes, bit of both, right? And I feel like a real man of God coexists somewhere in between Father Judd and Monsignor Wicks. I felt like in one sense we got two caricatures or two sort of a polarized opposites that I won't deny. They exist in Christendom. Both of them exist. But a real man of God exists in between. So in one sense, there's a bit of two caricatures pointing out what the man of character ought to really look like. And that it starts right at the beginning of the movie. I was upset a little bit when he gets called in, Judd gets called in, and the priests are talking to him. He's sort of on trial for punching that guy.
Yeah.
And the one priest says, we need fighters today, but to fight the world, not ourselves. A priest is a shepherd, the world is a wolf. And Judd's response was, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Which immediately made me bristle. Like, well, okay, Father Judd, Jesus in Matthew 10 says, behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. and Father Judd goes on. He's like, you start fighting wolves before you know it. Everyone you don't understand is a wolf. Christ came to heal the world, not fight it. I believe that. Show broken people like me the forgiveness and love of Christ. The world needs that so bad. Now, I don't disagree with anything he said there. But it's just not a complete picture.
It's not complete.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an incomplete picture of Christ, right? Christ also, in Matthew 7, beware of false prophets, he says, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. And even like his disciple John in 1 John, he says, do not love the world.
Yeah.
There you go. So he said, this priest said the world is a wolf. So he's talking about the biblical idea when we talk about the world. That doesn't mean we regard every single human all the time like, oh, wolf, wolf, wolf. But it's talking about the world as culture and its indoctrination and its trends. It says, don't love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. So in that sense, the world, the disciple John is talking about, is a wolf. So no, that priest was right, Father Jed, but yes, of course, Christ came to heal. We see that in the incarnation. Show broken people like me the forgiveness and love of Christ. Amen. The world needs it so bad. Amen. But the other part he just has to incorporate is Jesus himself. What does he say? He says, Christ came to heal the world, not fight it. Well, Matthew 10, and Jesus says, do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword, for I have come to turn a man against his father, daughter against mother, daughter. And he takes a man's enemies will be members of his own household. So our gospel will cause God-based division and God-based fighting. Hope not with fists. The boxer doesn't need, but that disposition there is something we're supposed to have.
Yeah, when I was watching, I thought, why not both in all of this? Yeah. So, fight the world. Well, yeah, you can synthesize both these things this way: is Christ meant to heal the world by us fighting with His weapons, like 2 Corinthians 10, 3-6 says, For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. And so there's some harshness within, we would say, Paul's parish there, but he's saying, yeah, we fight the world, but Monsignor Wicks is like way off base in terms of how you do that.
Right. And so there we get to Monsignor Wicks, where let's talk about this when we watched A Few Good Men with Eric last week. And he made the case that Jack Nicholson's big speech actually has a lot of merit.
Yeah, but, I was telling him when he was gearing up, I said, the older I get, the more I sympathize with Jack Nicholson's speech, with his speech. Right. Not with killing Santiago, but...
Right. So you take Monsignor Wicks, you take out his horrible lying in confession about masturbating. Just like, oh my gosh, he's such a horrible person, manipulating all of his flock, preaching weirdly against somebody he can't really know and chasing them out of the church. Like there was just there's so many vices and sins that he's got going on. But when they has a conversation with Judd, also you don't punch a man and then start kicking him. Again, we don't fight like that. But when he gets Judd worked up, with that speech right there, he says, right now you're angry. You should be, because the world wants to destroy us. Okay? Absolutely true.
Wants to destroy the things of Christ.
Yes. And then he goes on, your version of love and forgiveness is a sop, he says. And there's something to that about a portion of Christianity in the church today. He says it's going along to get along with modernity. Like, ooh, that is sadly a nice chunk of the church today in America, not wanting to offend this garbage world. Meanwhile, they destroy us. And sure, he mentions feminist, Marxist whores. Yeah. But when like the world and its indoctrination, he says, bit by bit they do. But I carry my burden, I hold the line. And you simpering child from Albany, are you going to get angry and fight? And when he said that, I thought of 1 Timothy 6:12, right? Fight the good fight of the faith, Paul tells Timothy. Yeah. He doesn't punch and kick Timothy as Paul's instructing Timothy.
Yeah.
But he says, Timothy, you're going to need to fight. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses. And what I love is then that Judd does step up, right? What does he say? You're poisoning this church, and I'll do whatever it takes to save it, to cut you out like a cancer. And I'm just like, yes! Now see, there's a good Christian ready to battle.
Yeah.
Even the one priest at the beginning even says, like, nobody's upset you clocked that deacon. In fact, kind of the opposite.
Yeah. We want you to fight, but how?
So how?
The second time I watched this movie, I was trying to think of, okay, is there anything sympathetic about Monsignor Wicks? Because the first watch through, you just don't like him at all. And I'm a little sad that he ended up not being a real believer. Like, I guess it doesn't say that he was an atheist or that he didn't believe in Christ, but he ends up saying, I don't like these people. I hate them. I want to leave them. As soon as he gets a chance to leave. And I was like, okay, that makes you sympathetic to the plot that moves forward. But I would have liked a conversation between somebody who genuinely believes the church militant, and Judd to be a little more sympathetic and to wrestle with those questions. Because I think Judd in many ways is mostly right, especially between people. Monsignor Wicks might be a little bit more proper in terms of institutional fights. Some of those things he pointed out I do think are bad, but it was hardly reflected in any of Wicks's preaching, and so it was a bit of a miss, but it was a fun back and forth between those two.
Yeah, it's not a 50-50 ratio, the tension to split the difference between those two. But I felt like Father Judd has the heart of Christ the servant, but he's compromised by a bit of unbiblical passivity, whereas Monsignor Wicks displays the protective heart of Christ, but he's been so poisoned by his own pride and greed and twisted it, and we see that when he goes to leave in that scene. He's like, welcome to my church.
My church.
It's like, oh wait, the minute it ceased being Jesus' church, all of that anger, all of that then is now derailed and on the wrong track. And so,
and that's a huge lesson from this movie that is good that Christians should take out of it is you need to follow Christ, not whoever your pastor is, more. You need to follow Christ more than you do political figures. You need to follow Christ more than you do your favorite influencers, even your favorite podcast, Popcorn Theology. Like you need to follow Christ.
Yeah,
and
they clearly choose him in that room. Remember?
Yeah,
there's his sins are displayed. He's not repentant, and they're like, well, but we need him. So
so Lee for a moment goes, okay, I'm trying to play the good Christian. We're all really upset about what he's done. And he's kind of looking around, and then nobody's changing. So he goes, but desperate times, we're in a war against the world, and we need a warrior. And he begins that whole speech with, we're upset about this, and ends with, no matter what you say or do, we're with you.
Yeah.
And that is the danger. I mean, I think when people are talking about things like Christian nationalism and the melding of religion and politics, it's like, that's the attitude that I'm afraid of. I don't like that. That's terrible. And so
but that's where I feel like it's a disingenuous ploy to make him a surrogate for Trump, like you mentioned earlier. Because there is a difference. Because again, like going through Daniel right now in my church, right? Nebuchadnezzar gets, like, 1 minute he's praising God, the next minute he's trying to burn to death the people of God. He is this massive flip-flopping, obvious non-believer, which to me resonates a little more. Like, well, okay, where are we at in our nation right now? We have a guy who one day who's published his own version of a Bible, and then the next day says, I can't be like you guys, I hate my enemies. Just literal quote at Charlie Kirk's funeral. So, like, well, boy, but there's a difference between a Nebuchadnezzar and how even Daniel deals with him, and how Daniel or any Christian would deal with someone in a pulpit. There is something different between a president and a pulpit. How you deal with a president or a king like Nebuchadnezzar as Christians or as God's people before Christ, right? That has always been a very curious, different conversation and a different tension. If somebody is in the religious authority position, that's a standard they're held to. Yep. Very, very differently, very, very strictly. Like, so we would never. So it's a false equivalency. Like, you can't have a minister as a stand-in for a president in any circumstance. And at the end of the movie, doesn't work.
He's trying to make that shift because that's where he fits
Yeah,
better.
maybe
He's trying to go from religious to having to being rich and powerful politically. And I think that lesson is a fair one to ingest. Because like when I was watching these characters have it out, it's like, I think what would be really interesting is to talk to them and challenge them about, what do you mean by church? What do you mean by saved by Jesus? Saved from what? Saved to what? What does a saved person do? And those questions are more interesting. I think they would be, like we've been talking about, just half right or half wrong here and there.
Yeah.
And so, man, their interplay is great, and I think that's why this movie is making millions of dollars and making a lot of podcasts. And like, there's really are lessons to take, because in light of that discussion where they're kind of two-dimensional views of ministry, my main point here was that, along with Judd, people need to have a Damascus moment where their eyes are opened to have grace for the wicked. Now, in the Bible, a Damascus moment was the Apostle Paul is persecuting Christians because they're Christians, and Jesus blinds him while he's on the road to Damascus to persecute more people. So he's physically blinded so that he can spiritually see that Jesus actually is the risen Lord. That's what a Damascus moment really, really means. But where this movie takes it is really close to the next part of the Damascus moment, because Paul has to go to Ananias, who's a Christian who is his enemy at this point, and that Christian comes and offers him grace by praying for him, and something like scales fall from Paul's eyes, and his sight is returned. And so in Knives Out, a Damascus moment is this. It's scales falling from somebody's eyes going, I've been playing some kind of game or trying to protect myself. What I need to do is focus on grace for the wicked and the undeserving, to take time to care for other people as Christ would. As Judd says, not this, but this. Not fists up, but cruciform. The world needs that so much right now. I mean, that's what this movie is preaching, and it's a good message. In contrast to, as we've been saying, fight the world. Like that dichotomy reminded me of in Luke 9 when the disciples, the Samaritans kick them out of their town, and the disciples say, "Do you want to call down fire and consume them?" And Jesus rebukes them. That's not how we're going to fight. We're not here to destroy them. And then in this movie, there's three Damascus moments, and they're contagious with one another. Actually, is one Damascus moment leads to the other two. So Judd's Damascus moment is he's been wrapped up in this murder mystery, and he could go to jail. He could lose his purpose as a priest. He's really struggling with, that's where I get my significance and my purpose in being a priest. And in the middle of trying to get information from sweet, talkative Louisa on the other side of the phone, she asks him for prayer. And he lets go of his worry and listens to hers, where she says, look, my mom is in hospice in the hospital, and she's been losing her mind, and she's been really angry, and I yelled back at her, and I'm afraid that the last thing I'll ever have said to my mom were these horrible things, and I feel so alone. And in the middle of this murder mystery, Judd sits with her and is just the presence of the ministry of presence with her, praying for her. And he just concludes, I don't want to be a part of your game solving this mystery, Blanc. He has this. So his philosophy that he's been using the whole part of the movie, he comes back to it and he says, I'm not here to fight the wicked and bring them to justice, but to serve the wicked and bring them to Christ. Amen. He's living out his philosophy. Yeah. But I'm wearing a Batman shirt because I love the bring them to justice. But this is his Damascus moment. And what's great about that is that moment comes back to Benoit Blanc. At the very end, Blanc has figured out the mystery. But in the end, he looks down kind of defeated while everybody's gathered in the church and says, I can't solve this. And everybody interprets it a different way. So Cy says, he can't solve this, then Monsignor Wicks, it really was a miracle. I'm going to go get 1 million followers because I can use Benoit Blanc's reputation to pad my YouTube clout. He's unable to do it. It must be a miracle. And then there's other people in the congregation who are, what? Don't just say this to protect me, protect my faith from being debunked. That's one way you could say I can't solve this, is that I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Yeah. But he says I can't solve this case because effectively I need to give grace to the wicked, to love my enemy. And who's his enemy in this movie? The third person who has a Damascus moment is Martha. And I was suspicious of her the whole time because typically in a movie the most religiously zealous is the bad guy. And she was the most religiously zealous in this movie. But she, in the end, has to give her final confession of all the people. She was trying to protect this whole church and this community from their sin of greed. But the tool she was using, like so many movies we've talked about this year, The tool was a lie.
Yeah.
And she held on to some hatred, which is not fully explained, for the harlot whore, whose name is Grace. And so Martha, in the end, through the Damascus moment of grace from Judd, which inspired the Damascus moment of grace for Benoit Blanc, she is able to have that safe place that Judd had been talking about in order to confess her most terrible sins, to meet Christ, to be saved, and be set free.
Yep.
It's like, that will preach. The lesson of this movie is that people need a Damascus moment in order to have grace for their enemies so that people can be healed. Yep. And it's like, by Jesus, in some way they don't describe, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I can't argue with that. And it was interesting. Yeah, the grace component was maybe a little on the nose, I thought, the whole time. But at the same time, though, you could talk to a lot of people who are like, oh, I didn't think about that. So, because you're not necessarily looking for it, like we are a little more constantly.
Well, in the end, the conclusion, too, is what was so interesting to me about this movie is that this small-town church was built upon lies and greed and ego. And all it took was the introduction of a sincerely faithful Christ follower to crack that shell. A little bit of truth. He challenged Martha because her perspective was that she's the good person. Said, can you really confess your deepest sins here? Because you all look like you're living in a cage of fear. And she confesses her sin, and that launches the whole plot because he's trying to create a safe place where wicked people, which is all of us, can actually confess their sins and be healed by Christ and walk daily with him. Yeah. And so he launches this plot by being a genuine follower of Christ, which is just, it's really cool. And in the end, it's like one person got what they wanted, but there was God gave him a sense of humor. Another person got a fresh start. Another person is stuck craving after their inheritance. And the great little double meaning where he says, your inheritance is in Christ. And the final shot is that jewel in the crucifix, which is, it's so emblematic of so many things. It's that Judd is not corrupted by this greed. He's a genuine follower of Christ. Yeah. And that he's not actually lying here.
I guess technically not lying. Technically not lying. That might be a little fuzzy one. We'd have to redeem that a little bit maybe versus just receive it entirely. Yeah. But symbolically, right. Like, where does the movie land and tell us that our wealth is found? It's the heart of Christ. Yeah.
And so I felt icky the way it caricatured so many things about me, but like if you cut through the weeds and see the message that it's trying to do in terms of trying to propagate ideas in the world, it's have grace for your enemies. Don't fight them and try to crush them politically and ideologically. Listen to them and love them. It's like, that is great, and I will take it. You know, I can march with that banner a little bit. So with that, I think we'll dive into our lightning round and start bringing this episode to a close. Okay, so diving into this lightning round, what are some things that we can thoughtfully reject in this movie? Do you have any on your mind? Perhaps that final lie that we were just talking about, huh?
Yeah. Well, that is. There's that bit of deception there at the end where it feels a little compromised with he and Blanc. Even though it's the last thing you would want to do, it's the honest thing to do. So I kind of feel like as a Christian, it'd be like, boy, this stinks, but this needs to be handed over to where it ought to be. So it makes a very satisfying and symbolic ending. I'm not sure it fits.
Because he kind of repeats part of the sin of Martha by like a little noble lie for their own good.
Well, he's hidden it in the statue, whereas, or even Prentice, like he just hid it in his body. So it's like, that's a little dicey. It made for good comedy. Yeah. As Sai is so frustrated. But,
I guess for me, one thing one thing for me to reject in this film is just the priests cussed from beginning to end. It just and it played for humor, but it's just not like anybody I know who has devoted their life to ministry.
Right.
Catholic, Protestant. I've heard, people cuss in moments of aggression or being surprised because we're all human, but describing somebody in a sober context as a bodily appendage or something like that was just, I get a little tired of it.
Well,
It's funny.
and I don't mind it so much when, knowing a lot of pastors, I don't mind it so much if it's they make a scatological. They use a word for feces that maybe is the culturally inappropriate one, or when
As
things
Paul
are,
did.
Yeah, when it's a vulgarity versus actually profaning the name of Christ. But yeah, there's that moment where he literally just says Jesus as that. I didn't even feel like that felt like it was played for humor, but actually out of the character of that character.
Yeah,
I don't,
it was contrary to character, and
Yeah.
it was consistent enough in the movie from beginning to end that it's kind of like, well, the good ones are the ones that talk vulgarity like real. You can be real with people without vulgarity.
No.
It's hard, but you can. But I was one of the only things to reject that we didn't really talk about in terms of like philosophical or anything, but some ideas to receive or redeem. Like, I thought this movie painted a wonderful picture of the damage of lies, whether they were well-intended or not. I mean, almost all the lies get punished in this movie and found out. It's a movie about truth being brought out. You know, a lie from Prentice, which might have been good or well-intended and for their own good, meant to save people from their greed with this jewel, produced several murders. You know, Martha, in order to preserve this lie, to preserve the institution of the church, was it three or four people died because of that lie?
Yeah.
How many people? You know, Prentice, Grace, Wicks, what was the doc, and Martha, all died because of these. Samson. Oh, poor Samson. He was a good one too.
Yeah.
And then another practice to redeem from this movie is the practice of confession. You know, it's just outside of like the vulgar confessions that Monsignor Wicks had. Some of them were like, I envied people. I can't remember the last time I've confessed my envy. It's really that would be a really good thing to confess. And so, along with all of the discussions, there's things like that in this movie that are actually you can receive that.
And we don't have to go to a priest. We can even go directly to God, right? I mean, it's like I don't know do I need to if I saw my neighbor's stuff and had a moment of covetousness, I don't necessarily have to run down the street to my face. I ought to repent right there, right? That's like but it's interesting. That was a particularly odd moment because I suppose he was starting small in that speech before he revved up and gave Jed some of the weird stuff, but like that one was actually genuine.
Well, it was played off as some kind of power play, the way Wicks was confessing. I'm not even sure how that was supposed to work, besides just being unsettling.
Just to throw him off his game, just to mess with him,
Yeah, but the movie does preach that confession is a good and freeing thing. And even as a Protestant, I say, it's good. I wouldn't even mind confession booths in my church. It's just that I don't believe that specific priests are the mediators of Christ's forgiveness, but that we're a kingdom of priests. So I'd be like, James, you and I get in the confession booth, and then we get out, trade places, and confess to one another.
That's right.
Right? That's my view on it, and that would be so healthy if more people did. Because I wonder how many people listen to this. Have you confessed a sin to any other Christian that you know in the last week or month? You know, it would be a good practice.
Yeah.
And is your church, as Father Judd said, a place where that could happen, where you come to Jesus for the daily sustaining bread? Although also you should come for faith in his perfect life, his death on your behalf, his burial and resurrection to offer you new life, which was not mentioned in any faithful sense throughout the whole movie. But that's enough for me now. Do you have any more concluding thoughts before we put this one in a coffin?
Well, it would have been nice to show. I don't know what we didn't really see anyone put drinking in a proper biblical. Samson abstaining, good, but then Monsignor Wicks obviously drinking, in the middle of service. Well, but then even Judd kind of getting too drunk, where the guy has to ask if he could actually ride his bicycle, and I suspect that drink also led him to throw the wolf head at the church. Like it almost just sort of it just sort of had either bad use or abstention. So it's like, I'd redeem that. There's, like many things in this movie, there's a middle ground where it's not a sin, it's a sin in how it's used. So,
and especially in this movie, it's whatever a priest does represents Christ in some meaningful sense. And so we're not just coming around balls and strikes on all the sins of everybody in the plot, but it's this person represents the narrative core of what a religious person is supposed to be. So you look at that and you go, it's a little more heightened.
Yeah, I didn't see Judd feeling poorly for that decision in any. He was pretty straight laced and confessing on so many other things.
But I was drunk and I broke a lamp and I broke a window in our church.
Yeah,
I was like that. Whatever your views on how much you can and can't drink, the fruit of that drinking was not great.
Yep. Small thing, but there you go.
Yeah, small things. It almost seems so small considering how grand the rest of our discussion in this movie is. But there's actually plenty to discuss. Like if you wanted to give us your assessment of each of the characters in that church through social media and stuff, I'll meet you there because there's so much fun to talk about. But in the meantime, between now and then, keep engaging media and movies from a godly worldview, and remember, you are not a mindless consumer.
Thanks for watching this episode of Popcorn Theology. For more content, subscribe on YouTube. Follow and interact on social media to help broaden the conversation. Check out our archive of past episodes at popcorntheology.com or wherever you listen to podcasts, and consider becoming a patron saint by supporting us on Patreon, which lets you interact, influence, and enjoy exclusive bonus content.